In this comparative study, I'll be analyzing the impact the French New Wave film movement has had on the current film industry through the use of film elements. The French New Wave emerged in the late 1950s, and the movement helped give directors full control over their work. Filmmakers shot on areas with handheld cameras, and they would usually incorporate extensive panning shots as well as long takes. By using handheld cameras, filmmakers were able to obtain a wider range of movements and camera angles. The film Breathless, produced in 1960, shaped French culture and successfully exemplified the French New Wave movement. Breathless begins with Michel, played by Jean-Paul Belmondo, in a car. Jump cuts, which are a characteristic of French New Wave, were continuously added in this scene as Michel passed the other cars. As the scene continued, there were cuts between the camera being placed on the dashboard of the car and handheld shots from behind Michel, allowing the audience to understand the scene from different angles. Later on, we were introduced to the rising action of the film, which was Patricia returning to her hotel room to find Michel already inside. Most French New Wave style films use panning shots, which can help establish location and slowly reveal information about a place. At timestamp 34:36 in Breathless, the filmmaker used a close-up shot of Michel, then panned up to a drawing placed above his head, and after finishing his dialogue, the camera panned back down. Throughout the scene, the dialogue seemed to flow and be very natural, making the audience question if the scene was improvised, which is part of the French New Wave. Towards the end of the scene, classical music began playing in the background, and Michel was then filmed from Patricia's point of view. Now, in the scene with Patricia, played by Jeanne Serberg in the passenger seat, discontinuity editing was used from one shot to the next, and the filmmaker strictly used natural lighting, more specifically being direct sunlight and shade. Through Jean-Luc Godard's use of jump cuts in the film, the story was still able to be followed even though small sections of the scenes were chopped out. The use of jump cuts helped give the effect of moving forward in time. At the end of the film, intrusive, blaring music was played as the audience witnessed the tragic death of Michel. According to the website Culture Hub, this final scene was connected to how Patricia violated Michel's love, just like Hollywood violated French theaters with the help of the American government. Film elements used in Breathless inspired numerous directors, such as Sofia Coppola, who produced Lost in Translation in 2003. One of the main characteristics of the French New Wave movement is location shooting. In one of the opening moments in Lost in Translation, Bob Harris, played by Bill Murray, gazed out of his taxi at Tokyo, which was lit up in neon colors. This scene had cuts between handheld close-up shots of Bill Murray's reactions to the scenery, as well as shots of the city from Bill Murray's perspective. In one specific shot of Bill Murray admiring the scenery, Sofia Coppola decided to use a medium shot with imagery in the background that had a blue tint. The shots of Bill Murray were shot at eye level, and Murray was centered in the frame. The night lights being so vivid gave them dominance, and it was what the audience was being attracted to first. Coppola decided to use this blue tint into another scene which had Charlotte, played by Scarlett Johansson, sitting on a windowsill. The scene had darker tones to it, such as dark blues and black tones. The camera was focused on Scarlett while the city was blurred out in the background, which showed a stylistic choice that Sofia Coppola decided to use. The audience was then introduced to a scene which had Bill Murray sitting alone on a bed in a hotel room. The scene was actually used for the film poster of Lost in Translation, which is why I chose to insert a screenshot this time rather than a screen recording. The scene was captured with a wide shot, which helped capture a good amount of the hotel room, and the shot appeared to be static in the beginning of the scene since there was no camera movement. The majority of the lighting was being captured from the lamps on the nightstand, and one could say the scene had moderate lighting since the scene wasn't too bright or dark. Murray sitting alone in the empty hotel room helped give off a lonely tone to the audience. The shot from this scene was also filmed from eye level since the scene wasn't too dramatic and the framing is loose. At the end of Lost in Translation, there was a long shot of Charlotte and Bob, played by Scarlett Johansson and Bill Murray, having their final encounter. Even though there were many other individuals wandering around the streets, Charlotte and Bob were each other's main focus, and the close-up shots of them looking at each other showed the chemistry between the two. Instead of using continuity editing, Coppola decided to use jump cuts as a way to enhance the emotion from the audience as the interaction between the characters was being portrayed. Besides having French New Wave characteristics, Lost in Translation had cultural context. Bill Murray traveling to Japan showed the audience what it is like to adapt to a foreign culture, and a solid cultural comparison between Japan and the United States was clearly demonstrated. In the scene with Bill Murray at the photo shoot, the photographer was in a rush and time pace of the overall scene was very fast, indicating that the photographer was in a rush and that there was busy city life outside of the photo shoot that the photographer had to keep up with. This scene also had the panning of a camera used to show the audience where Bill was seated. After going over Breathless and Lost in Translation, we were able to see how stylistic innovations such as jump cuts, location shooting, and improvised dialogue is still used today. Being able to see scenes shot on the busy streets of Paris allowed the audience to feel as if they were actually there in Paris and not just watching from behind a screen. Let's specifically talk about the location shooting for a second. A big part of the French New Wave film movement is shooting in a natural environment. At the end of Breathless, injured Michelle was running down the street, and the facial expressions on the bystanders' faces showed concern and confusion. This was because these bystanders were not actors, and they were unaware of the filming taking place. Breathless is still such a significant film in the film industry today, and its use of French New Wave elements such as handheld cameras, natural lighting, and jump cuts has influenced so many directors. Jean-Luc Godard's work in the film even inspired Arthur Penn, who directed Bonnie and Clyde. Parts of Breathless felt as if they were unfinished and raw, which was a part of the French New Wave. As the characters were on the run from the police, they were often seen sitting back while smoking cigarettes. This calm, non-frantic attitude is usually represented in movies today, but when it was used in Breathless, it was seen as unusual behavior. The use of improvised dialogue that we saw in Breathless, for example, the scene with Michelle and Patricia in the hotel room, was also used in Lost in Translation. The sushi bar scene in Lost in Translation was actually improvised. According to the website Taste of Cinema, Coppola only wrote "tries to make her laugh" in the script, and Murray did the rest. Film elements used in Breathless are still used in the cinema world today, and the film helped kick off the French New Wave.